fish resources are depleted due to various reasons. One is that they are using band net and then they're destroying the sea bottom and all. But in Sri Lankan coast, still the ecosystem is preserved.
Because there's more fish in the Sri Lankan side, sometimes the fishermen from India try and go there.
Yeah, that's also one of the reason. But another reason is that in the sea, we can't able to find out the landmark. This is Sri Lankan coast, that is the Indian coast. But some of the bigger fishes, they know that area, a lot of fish resources are available. So knowingly they are going that reason.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning and I'm on the beach in Nagapatnam. The fishing boats are beginning to come back in. The sea in front of me provided everything to the people here. It gave them food, it gave them employment. But 10 years on from the tsunami, for many of the fishermen who lost their family and friends, they see it as their enemy.
That was Rahul Tandon reporting. Now, what is fear? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is the emotion of pain or uneasiness caused by the sense of impending danger or by the prospect of some possible evil. So is fear a sensation we should be feeling at work? It's perhaps normal to get a bit anxious about whether you're up to the job or if you'll make some sort of catastrophic mistake and get thrown out. Our regular commentator Lucy Kellaway of the Financial Times, though, is finding that the older and more experienced she gets, the less fearful she feels at work. And she's worried that while that makes her feel more comfortable, it may not be entirely a good thing.
All my working life I've been scared of failing, of looking a fool, of talking in public, of not being good enough, and of being found out. If I draw a graph that plots fear against age, my level when I joined the workforce at 21 was pretty high, but then got higher still as I noticed almost everyone else seemed to know what they were doing. Then, about 10 years ago, my fear stabilised and slowly started to subside. The repeated daily experience of doing things at least adequately helped a bit. What helped more was failing at the odd thing and realising that you don't actually die. But then, at some point a year or two ago, the momentum suddenly shifted and the graph started to move sharply downwards. Since then, the slide into fearlessness has been extraordinarily swift. At this rate, I will soon have gone post-fear entirely. The other day, I spoke at a dinner where there were lots of important people, and as I got up on stage, I had the odd feeling that I'd forgotten something. And then I realised that what I'd left behind was my fear. To find out if others feel the same way, I've spent the last few days prowling around with a pen and inviting people of roughly my age to draw their own terror charts. Everyone's chart looks a bit different, but there are common features. Many people between 50 and 55 seem to have experienced the same precipitous decline in their levels of fear at work. The reason for this may be the same reason that people tend to get happier when they are in their mid-50s. Most of your career is behind you. You're less ambitious and have less far to fall. You're more financially secure. And you've finally noticed that lots of other people are nothing like as good as you always feared they might be. In a way, being post-fear has absolutely everything to recommend it. It means that you glide through the working week without a knot in your stomach. You sleep better and are generally more cheerful. Yet as an employee, being fearless is not obviously an advantage. It may make you more valuable as you can be relied on to tell the truth, but it may also make you complacent and overconfident. These traits are more of a liability the higher up the ladder you go. If you're running a business and are scared of nothing, you're dangerous and should be removed from the office at once before something bad happens. Fear is the vital ingredient that keeps organisations vibrant. This is Lucy Kellaway for the BBC World Service.
Well, fear not, you can always download this programme to listen to at your leisure from the BBC Business page on Facebook. But that's all of this. Business Report.
The BBC World Service.
We have the headlines.
Democracy protests have spread to new parts of Hong Kong.
But we go further.
I am on a pedestrian walkway looking down into the sea of people that have taken to the streets here.
The BBC World Service.
People here who've been living with war and tragedy for more than a decade are finding ways
to get on with their lives.
The world's radio station. You're listening to the BBC World Service.
It's next, and at 19:30 GMT, Discovery finds out about new technology, rerouting, that will let airline pilots choose their own routes.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. Hello, welcome to World Have Your Say. I'm Anu Anand. Coming up, the aftermath of the Sydney siege. The sound there of police storming the cafe where a gunman held an unknown number of hostages for 16 hours. It's still early morning in Australia and details are still coming in, but the ordeal is over. We'll get the latest from the scene and hear reaction from Australians about the man believed to be the hostage taker. We'll also hear what the events of the past 24 hours reveal about the threat of terrorism in Australia and how the country has responded. Your thoughts are welcome on facebook.com/World Have Your Say. Security forces in Australia have stormed a cafe in the heart of Sydney where an Iranian-born gunman had been holding hundreds of hostages. Dramatic scenes broadcast live on television, loud bangs were heard and several hostages ran to safety before sustained gunfire rang out. Australian media are reporting the gunman has been shot dead and one of his captives has also been killed. John Donnison is in Sydney.
A day full of drama in Sydney came to an end in the most dramatic of fashions. Amid a hail of gunfire and explosions in the early hours of the morning, Australian commandos stormed the cafe, which has been at the centre of this siege. Paramedics rushed in to help the injured. This reporter witnessed the raid.
It does appear that police are making an attempt to shoot fire into the lit cafe and potentially resolve this situation.
Earlier in the evening, there were signs the gunman may have been losing control when a number of hostages managed to escape, vaulting to safety through the cafe doors. The gunman has been named as Man Haron Monis, an Iranian cleric moved to Australia to He was well known to the police and at the time failed sexually the murder of his ex-wife, as well as facing sexual assault charges. He's also been convicted of sending offensive letters to the families of deceased Australian soldiers. This is him speaking in recent years.
This pen is my gun. And these words are my bullets. I'll fight with these weapons against oppression to promote peace.
There are reports one of Monis's demands was that an Islamic State flag be delivered to the cafe. As the siege unfolded, he'd forced some of the hostages to hold up another black flag, the Shahada, the Muslim declaration of faith, bearing the words in Arabic, "There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of God." Police here will now be looking into whether he operated alone or was part of any sort of wider network of extremists.
A United Nations report has asked international creditors to cancel the debts of the three countries worst affected by Ebola. A report by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa said cancelling the combined debts of around $2.6 billion would allow Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea to start afresh once the outbreak was under control. World News from the BBC. The European Union has promised to help rebuild basic services in the war-torn Syrian city of Aleppo, with a UN plan to stop the fighting there from being implemented. Aleppo is split between government and rebel forces, but the UN Special Envoy, Staffan de Mistura, hopes a local truce can be agreed. After being briefed on the plan, the EU's foreign ministers expressed their full support for it. In what's being seen as a major blow to the Syrian government, rebels are reported to have overrun 2 military bases in the country's northwestern Idlib province. Jim Muir reports from Beirut.
The loss of the 2 bases near the city of Marib in Idlib province is a considerable blow to the government. It had tried hard to hold on to them and managed to do so for more than 2 years, despite increasing rebel control in the province. But a collection of Islamist rebel groups, with the Kyiv franchise Nusra Front to the fore, finally prevailed. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, one of the few main networks reporting from on the ground, government helicopters picked up some of the army officers before the rebels moved in, while some of the garrison fled to nearby villages where they came under renewed pressure.
Russia's central bank has warned that the country's economy could contract by as much as 4.8% next year if oil prices remain at current levels. The prediction comes as the ruble hit a new low on Monday, trading at more than 60 to the US dollar. Spain's anti-corruption prosecutor has charged Real Zaragoza Football Club, its former manager and 2 teams of players for allegedly fixing a match. Those under investigation include Manchester United's midfielder Ander Herrera, the Atletico Madrid captain Gabi, and the coach of the Japanese national team Javier Aguirre. The charges relate to an end-of-season match in 2011, victory in which enabled Real Zaragoza to escape relegation from the top division. BBC News.
Hello, welcome. I'm Anu Anand. If you're just waking up in Australia, you'll probably be relieved to hear that the hostage situation in the heart of downtown Sydney has ended. 1 hostage is reported to be dead and the gunman has also been killed. That's according to Australian media reports. We saw earlier, about 2 hours ago, commandos storming the cafe moments after just 5 or 6 hostages ran from the building. Police then stormed the premises and there was a long exchange of gunfire. We now know that the hostage taker was well known to the police and the public, so we'll be asking whether the threat was taken seriously enough, and we'll also be hearing about the response to that siege amongst Australians. As always, there are lots of different ways to share your stories and your views. You can go to facebook.com/worldhaveyourSay, and you can also tweet us throughout the program using the hashtag WHYS. Now, needless to say, it's been an extremely tense and traumatic day in Sydney. We're talking about a spot just walking distance from the iconic Opera House, right there in the heart of the financial district. A gunman walked into a chocolate shop and a cafe at 9:45 a.m. Monday local time. Now, a few hours ago, he was identified as Man Haramonis, a 50-year-old Iranian-born man who's facing several different criminal charges. And then overnight, of course, the siege ended with police storming the premises and several of those hostages coming out. It's just about 5 a.m. now in Sydney, so people will only just be waking up to the news and the latest there. So let's go to the BBC's Phil Mercer, who's in Sydney. Now, Phil, we know that there was meant to be a press conference, but that's now being postponed. So tell us, what's the latest that you're hearing?
Well, we're hearing from a tweet from the New South Wales Police Force that the gunman has been killed in this siege that lasted for 16 hours. We're still not quite sure what triggered the police involvement. Perhaps it was activity inside the cafe, a loud noise, perhaps a gunshot that triggered that police assault on the premises. And when it came, it was fast, it was spectacular, it was extremely noisy too, in terms of we could hear loud explosions, we could hear gunfire, we could smell the gunfire in the air, and we are at the exclusion zone about 200 metres away from the cafe. So when the end of the siege came, it was dramatic, fast and frantic, and we do understand that the gunman was killed in that assault. There are unconfirmed reports too that another hostage has also lost their life, but at the moment we have no confirmation on that.
And of course, Phil, it was such a dramatic day. The images coming from that cafe, the hostages that you could see through that plate glass window, standing with their hands on the glass, many of them clearly distressed. And of course, the black flag appearing with the Islamic Declaration of faith. We also have a family station this time of the day nearby. What more are you hearing about the reaction of those involved, or indeed, even if we know how many were held?
Well, at the time, Lindt, which is a Swiss chocolate company, was saying that there were 10 staff members and the 30 customers at the time the siege began. The New South Wales police here in Eastern Australia disputed those figures, suggesting that the number was a lot less than that, and we are hoping for something and indeed the health and well-being of the hostages shortly here in Sydney. But for the family members of those hostages inside, it must have been an agonising 16 hours while they waited and hoped for the best. And during that particular time, there were 5 of the hostages who managed to either escape or were released by the gunmen. So it's extremely fraught, it's extremely tense during this 16-hour period, and safe to say it has been one of the biggest security operations Australia has ever seen. And as we say again, when the end came here in Sydney, it was swift and decisive, and it was spectacular. And once again, to repeat that news, New South Wales police tweeted that the gunman has been killed at the conclusion of this long siege.
And Phil, have they said whether they believe he was acting alone?
Well, really, there are 2 critical issues to consider here: the health and safety and well-being of the hostages, and also the motivations of this 49-year-old Iranian refugee identified as the gunman, who was man Heron Monis, who was granted political asylum in Australia in the 1990s. He was known to the police. He was on bail, accused of being an accessory to the murder of his ex-wife last year. Several years ago, he was convicted letters to parents of dead Australian soldiers killed overseas, poisonous correspondence. So this was a man who was known to the police. This was a man who had a lengthy criminal record. He was accused also of a string of sexual and indecent assault allegations. So this was a man who was clearly troubled. As to his motivation, was it personal, was it political, was he part of a broader? Now, we don't know the answer. But the police will be investigating this man's past to hopefully draw some conclusions and shed some light on what motivates this man to go into a coffee shop early one Monday morning here in Sydney and spread complete chaos and terror across the city and cause a great deal of anxiety and fear right across the nation.
We're going to talk to a hostage negotiator later, but Phil, before I let you go, what's the scene like there now?
Well, it's just after 5 o'clock in the morning now. Looking to the east over St Mary's Cathedral here in Sydney, and day is beginning to break, and there will be many Australians who will be waking up to the news that this 16-hour hostage siege is over. We've just seen some large police vehicles roll past us, and it looks as though the police are coming down. And it's quiet here. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's a relatively cool summer morning here in Eastern Australia, but in the next few hours and days, questions will be answered about the motivations of this man, the health of the hostages, and other details too. And of course, in the fullness of time, in the next few weeks and months, there will be introspection too, how Australia deals with its refugee community, with its Islamic community, how race relations are handled in this country, and more pertinently, Australia's reaction to the global terror threat. This is a country that has heightened its terrorist threat alert domestically in the last few months. We've seen serious and widespread counter-terrorism raids here in Sydney and Brisbane in September, new laws allowing the police and the intelligence agencies greater powers to detain suspected jihadis wanting to fight overseas. So this will be a period of intense discussion and introspection into all of those issues here in Australia.
Indeed, Phil, all very important points that we will discuss during the course of the next 15 minutes or so. Thank you very much to Phil Mercer in Sydney. Now let's speak to some of those Australians who have just been waking up to the news that the siege in Sydney is over. Amro Ali joins us from Sydney. Welcome to you, Amro.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And Yanni is from Melbourne, although he's travelling at the moment. I want to speak to you, just both of you, first of all, just about your reaction to the latest. Amro, have you just woken up to speak to us? And if so, thank you. And what do you make of the news that the siege is over?
Well, actually, I haven't slept yet. I'm relieved it's over. There was an expectation that it would last longer, than it would actually go on for a couple of days from the initial discussions. I'm relieved that it's sad that I think one person has died in terms of two people have died apparently. Was the latest, including the government and a hostage. So the wife of the hostage is
Did you stay up all night to watch the news unfolding? Is this a sort of unprecedented event?
In Australia, but it does give you something in terms of what I might see in Cairo or somewhere else. But so it was very unusual, and everything had an extreme element of uncertainty, and people were just really gripped by it.
Yanni, what about you? I know you're travelling at the moment in South Africa, but have you also been glued to the news, and what have you made of the events that have unfolded?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously because we've got so many different time zones, so it was happening during the day here. So, yeah, I mean, social media was going a bit crazy, and there was a lot of live reporting. I mean, it's a pretty crazy event, and it's an extreme event. It's so sad that the hostage lost their life. But I mean, even now that it's resolved, there's so much information that's been changing. The story's been changing. I've read so many different things. So it's definitely a very sad event in Australia's history. But there's still so many questions, aren't there? We don't really know exactly what's happened and why.
Yes, lots of questions about the man being known to police, being on their radar. I read a really interesting piece just now about the mental health of terrorist acts, and perhaps we could talk about that. I just want to bring in Ravi, who is from Sydney, but he's actually sitting right now in our London studio. And Ravi, you used to go to the Lint Cafe. Tell us a bit about your routine there and what sort of area it is.
That's correct. I used to live in Sydney, Australia. I've been living in London now for just over 3 years, and the Lint Cafe was by the Lint Cafe is near the marketplace, a kind of open-air plaza right near the financial district, like you said earlier, and it's very centrally located. And I think that for all of us overseas, that's what adds to it, a sense of surrealness to it, because that used to be a place I would go past every morning, and that this happened on a Monday morning when people are at their coffee run just makes it strange, because I could have been there. When I called home, funnily enough, my sister-in-law said, "Oh, it's so strange. As soon as we go to the Lint Cafe, we thought of you because you used to go there all the time."
There is that sense of unreality, isn't there? I remember when the London attacks happened in 2005. One of the buses was a local bus that I used to often take. I think that's part of the reason that these stories are so compelling for a lot of people. I just wonder how your friends, all of you, have been reacting. I mean, those who live in Sydney, was there a sense of calm? Was there a sense of panic? Was there a sense that people should go about their day-to-day lives, or that really people should stay home and this wasn't at all an ordinary day? Amro, you're there in Sydney. Tell me first of all what your friends have been saying about today.
I mean, social media has definitely been off the hook, and that's really the engagement I have with most of my friends, apart from the 2 or 3 I see physically in a day. But the problem is social media can actually skew the reality. Because I was in a cafe in Newtown today, up to 3 hours after the event had happened, and there were about 12 patrons in the cafe, and only 2, including myself, were watching the news coverage of the event. Everyone else was, sticking to their, laughing and conversing. So, and I think the gravity of the situation has been gripping for Sydney, for sure. And a lot of people have been talking about it. But I think to the rest of the world, it's really being amplified much, much more than what really has been taking place on the ground.
Yanni, I wonder for you, watching those live pictures, not just of the hostages, but then you're in a time zone where the police siege happened pretty much during the day. What did you make of the way that the police handled it? What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, it was, like I said before, I mean, there was just facts flying around everywhere, which I guess is the nature of 25 years of social media. But it was kind of hard to attacks, and I just don't think the shooter was dead or alive. So it's very hectic, and also, I was texting friends to make sure that they were okay. I had one friend who was in Sydney, and she was very scared, which is fine. So it's one of those things where I think distance almost does, as I said before, because you're getting a very targeted sort of and a very intense scene of the events. It's as if you're right there, whereas I guess 2 suburbs it's almost like you're not quiet because you're not being bombarded with numbers of course you're following, which seems like a bit work.
A couple of comments to share with you on Twitter. Someone called @Circas says there are a lot of ideologies behind a lone gunman. That's what we believe. We don't know that for sure. Taking the gunman out doesn't suddenly bring calm in society. And here's another one. Okadara tweets, Muslim, a follower of the religion of Islam. Terrorist, a person who engages in inhumane and violent acts. Not the same. Another hashtag we've seen is I'll ride with you. Now we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes, but let me bring in George Roden. He's a former Metropolitan Police hostage negotiator in the UK. George, welcome to World Have Your Say. There's been some interesting analysis in the last few hours, sort of piecing together. We've seen a lot of different events. We've had the shooting at the Canadian Parliament in October. We've had this particular incident in Sydney. Of course, we had things like Anders Behring Breivik, one of the worst terrorist attacks by a lone gunman just a couple of years ago. I just wonder, as a hostage negotiator, how do you try to ascertain whether someone is acting alone? Is it an easy thing to figure out?
No, absolutely not. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do, but in any situation, what you do is collate as much information and intelligence as you possibly can. So pre-going down to the scene of the incident or on the arrival itself, you will be getting as much information that you can from all sources. And sometimes it will only be a small amount of information. So you are picking up as much as you possibly can, but then you have to have a structure, which we do have as negotiators. We do have a plan, and we have a well-rehearsed plan that is incorporated with other agencies such as tactical firearms and special services. So to try and identify the person, it's about building up a plan. Why is it they're actually in that location? What outcomes do they expect from the situation?
How much of this is a security issue, something that should involve just law enforcement, and how much of it do you think in the last few years issues in mental health?
Well, we've seen quite a few of these. That the percentage of a lone wolf is sometimes of a mental issue. Bias, the guy that was in Oslo himself, they said he was psychotic and there was an element of narcissism. And then there are others all over the world who perpetrate violence in support of perpetrate violence in perpetrating following a political grievance. And it's hard to identify, but when some of these individuals actually come up to the forefront because of their criminal activities, it has been difficult for the services, and I say not just the police services, but the other intelligence services, to keep track of these individuals, to actually prioritise who are the ones that are going to commit such offences. In the Australian situation here now, yes, he was known, but did he have the tendency to actually become what he's become? And if so, well, the question is, why intelligence, like some of our issues that we've had over in this country? And it comes down to, I believe, sometimes
George, can I just ask you this before I bring in a couple of others, because we're going to have to take a break for the news in a bit. Are there some perpetrators that you just cannot negotiate with?
Intention to do one particular thing, and that is incorporating into other countries. They are willing to give their lives. Suicide bombers are very difficult to deal with, and that's a major worry within this country. How do we identify them? It's one of an issue for a negotiator. Is how do we actually get these people out alive if they are lone wolves, suicide bombers, etc. But as I said, we have well-rehearsed plans, and we can only do the best we possibly can as a multi-agency.
Okay, George, thank you very much. Just stay there. Let me bring in Sab Malik. Sab, we were mentioning a little just a couple of minutes ago about the hashtag that was trending on Twitter. I'll ride with you. This was Australians saying that if there were Muslims who felt threatened because of this incident, that they would support them and they would ride with them. What did you make of that? For you, was that a positive response?
I think it was a brilliant response given the situation, because generally you would expect that people would just all of a sudden start seeing it differently because you're a Muslim. But somebody started this and it caught on, and that's brilliant. It was really appreciated.
Amro, you were saying that some of your female Muslim friends had said that they would be keeping a low profile. Why is that? Why did they feel threatened?
I think because some of them wear the visible symbol being the hijab, the headscarf, so that makes it much more of a target than any other, say, a Muslim guy would be. And they have been in the past verbally harassed. Some haven't better, but that was the discussion in the morning. Very tools and actions become much more what has happened today has been a much more hashtag, which is really full of fire.
Okay, Sab, I've got to just go to the news in a minute, so I can't speak for too long. But very briefly, what did you make of the imagery of the black flag? Now, obviously, it's something that is just a profession of faith, but obviously some extremist organizations use it for their own ends.
I really don't care so much about it, other than the fact that it's faith, and that's about it. Anybody who carries it doesn't make them a Muslim, or they don't represent Islam.
And did you feel that, just yes or no, that the media there in Australia represented what the flag meant properly?
Yeah, I think generally the coverage has been pretty neutral. I'm pretty happy with that.
Okay, Sab, we're going to come back to you in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take a break for the news. If you've joined us just now, you're listening to the World Has to Say. We'll be back. Hotel
years. Incredible robusta shops.
Here at the Economics Festival, the experts, the hedge fund managers, the economists, what they think.
Capitalism has a self-destruct button. It has a limited period of applicability.
Looking at what other people thought what capitalism means to them, or capitalist, someone who's in favour of using capital letters at the start of every new sentence. There's always a comedian.
Number Crunch. Colin O'Regan's story of capitalism. Online at bbcworldservice.com. You're listening to World Have Your Say from the BBC World Service. We're hearing how Australians think their country has changed after the hostage-taking that ended just about 2 hours ago. We'll talk about the hashtag I'll Ride With You, which is being used to show solidarity between different ethnic groups. Stay with us for more details and tweet us using the hashtag WHYS. BBC News with Eileen McHugh. The siege in a cafe in central Sydney has come to a dramatic end, with commandos storming the building where an Iranian-born gunman had been holding a number of hostages. Loud bangs were heard and several hostages ran to safety before sustained gunfire rang out. The gunman has been named as Manharon Morris, South Putin terrorist, and all Palestinian violent offenders. Confirmed reports of one hostage and in other news, a UN report has asked international Liberia and Guinea start afresh once the outbreak was brought under control. Reports from eastern Afghanistan say fierce fighting has continued for a second day between hundreds of Taliban militants and local villagers who are supported by some Afghan security forces. Battles are taking place in a remote mountainous district of Kunar province on the border with Pakistan. The Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu and the US Secretary of State John Kerry have had talks ahead of an expected Palestinian initiative at the United Nations. The Palestinians want to do an emergency draft resolution that will demand an end to the Israeli occupation into the US. Denmark is submitting a claim to territory around the North Pole to a UN panel, which is gathering evidence of the control of the region. Denmark will be competing with other countries bordering the Arctic, which is potentially the Spanish prosecutors have charged the Real former manager of Hayes for allegedly fixing a match in 2011, victory in which enabled the team to escape relegation. That was under